gentlemen, we're back here on World Championship Wrestling. You know, I was thinking about Paul E. Dangerously, but not for very long. But when I did, I thought...
Have you ever stopped to wonder why the Midnight Express, one of wrestling's most iconic tag teams, never really felt like a completely unified force? Let's solve that mystery today. The simplest answer? Constant lineup changes. Those shifts slowly chipped away at the team's identity. But trust us, there's a lot more to this story than just a few roster swaps. Let's dig deeper and find out what really kept the Midnight Express from becoming the unstoppable unit they were meant to be. All right, so let's dive deeper into why the Midnight Express, despite their legacy, never truly felt like one solid, unified team. Sure, we touched on the lineup changes being a big reason, but trust me, there's a whole lot more to the story. First off, one of the biggest reasons fans still debate the Midnight Express today is because of those constant shifts in the lineup. I mean, just think about it. When someone says the Midnight Express, which version comes to your mind first? For many, it's either Dennis Condrey and Bobby Eaton with Jim Cornette, or Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane with Cornette still in their corner. Those two lineups were the most well-known, no doubt. But before either of those came the original trio, Condrey, Norval Austin, and Randy Rose, with manager Buddy Wayne and later Paul E. Dangerously. And let's not forget the version that tried to reclaim that original title, Condrey, Rose, and Dangerously once again, this time during their WCW run in the late 80s. And here's where things get even messier. When WCW tried to kick off a heated feud between the newer Midnight Express, Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane, still led by Cornette, and the so-called original Midnight Express, with Condrey and Rose managed by Paul E. Dangerously, fans were ready for fireworks. On paper, it sounded like a dream rivalry, filled with history and personal grudges. But in reality, it fell flat. The feud never really took off the way it should have. Backstage politics, personal issues, and poor long-term planning killed what could have been one of the most emotional and dramatic tag team stories of that era. Condrey even left WCW early into the storyline, leaving the whole angle scrambling without proper closure. Now, speaking of drama, you can't talk about the Midnight Express without mentioning Jim Cornette. No doubt about it, Cornette was a huge part of their success. His promos, his energy, his presence at ringside, he brought the team to life. But let's be honest, Cornette's fiery personality and blunt attitude didn't always sit well with promoters or bookers. Over time, that kind of friction might have hurt the team behind the scenes. Opportunities could have slipped away, storylines might have changed course, and long-term pushes may have been altered because Cornette just couldn't hold back his opinions. And as if things weren't already complicated enough, let's fast forward a bit to when WWE tried to revive the Midnight Express name by slapping it on a new duo, Bob Holly and Bart Gunn. Yep, that happened. The company repackaged them as the New Midnight Express, with Jim Cornette managing again. But fans were not having it. The chemistry wasn't there, the legacy wasn't respected, and it just felt off. Instead of paying tribute to the past, it ended up feeling like a watered-down version of something great. Most longtime fans prefer to pretend that version never even existed. And here's the real kicker. The Midnight Express, in any of their main forms, has never been inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. Not Condrey and Eaton, not Eaton and Lane, not even Cornette as their manager. For a team that influenced an entire generation of tag team wrestling, that's a pretty big oversight. Fans and wrestling historians alike have been scratching their heads for years over that one. It's not just about awards, it's about recognition. And somehow the Midnight Express still hasn't gotten the full credit they deserve. So when you step back and look at it all, the revolving door of members, the broken feuds, the backstage chaos, the failed reboot, and the lack of Hall of Fame honors, it all adds up to one big reason why the Midnight Express never felt like one truly unified team. But let's set all that aside for now. Today, buckle up as we take a trip all the way back to where it all began, the early days of the Midnight Express. Back in 1980, Southeast Championship Wrestling witnessed the formation of a tag team that would spark something special. Dennis Condrey and Randy Rose joined forces and began making waves. Then in 1981, Norval Austin stepped into the picture, donning a mask as the Shadow and partnered with the young Brad Armstrong. Together, they upset Condrey and Rose on May 4th to win the Southeastern Tag Team Championship. But just a couple of months later, on July 27th, Condrey and Rose took the titles back. What happened next would change the landscape of tag team wrestling in the South. Austin turned on Armstrong and teamed up with Condrey and Rose. The trio became known as the Midnight Express, a name, as Dennis Condrey would later explain, that had nothing to do with the movie of the same name. It was all about their look, black clothes, black cars, and wild nights that lasted past midnight. As a trio, they embraced the Freebird rule, which meant any two of the three could defend their tag titles. They captured the AWA Southern Tag Team Championship in the Continental Wrestling Association, but eventually lost those belts to Bobby Eaton and Sweet Brown Sugar. After that, they returned to SECW in 1982 and soon recaptured the Southeastern Tag Team titles from Robert Fuller and Jimmy Golden. They kept busy in SECW, feuding with the Mongolian Stomper and his kayfabe son, trading the tag titles back and forth. Another heated rivalry followed with Dizzy Ed Hogan and Ken Lucas. The title bounced between the two teams, but the numbers game eventually helped the Midnight Express regain the belts by summer 1983. Their last SECW feud was again with Fuller and Golden, who finally ran them out of the territory. After losing the belts to Brad and Scott Armstrong, the original Midnight Express disbanded. But this was far from the end. Bobby Eaton, who had been part of the group earlier, was now sent to Mid-South Wrestling during a talent trade. There, the idea came up to reform the Midnight Express. This time, it was Eaton and Dennis Condrey under the management of a fast-talking, tennis racket-wielding Jim Cornette. This new version was no longer a group. It was a focused two-man unit. Condrey, already known as Loverboy, was now paired with beautiful Bobby Eaton. Their first major storyline was against the Mid-South Tag Team Champions, Magnum TA and Mr. Wrestling 2. In one memorable segment, they tarred and feathered Magnum TA in the ring. When Mr. Wrestling 2 turned on Magnum, it handed the Express an easy title win. Between them, Condrey and Eaton would go on to hold a combined 53 tag team titles, an all-time record. During this time, Wendy Richter was briefly made an honorary member of the group, thanks to Cornette's antics. With Magnum and Wrestling 2 split, the Midnight Express turned their attention to a new team, the Rock and Roll Express, Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson. That rivalry kicked off a legendary feud that would span multiple promotions and stretch well into the 90s. It was tag team wrestling at its finest, fast-paced, exciting, and loaded with emotion. The feud took over Mid-South Wrestling in 1984 before the Midnight Express moved on. They briefly appeared in World Class Championship Wrestling in Texas, where they battled the Fantastics, Bobby Fulton and Tommy Rogers. But when things didn't click in WCCW, they headed to Jim Crockett Promotions in 1985. This gave them national TV exposure on Superstation TBS. Back in the same company as the Rock and Roll Express, the Midnight Express rekindled that feud and took the NWA World Tag Team titles from Morton and Gibson in February 1986. The reign didn't last long. They lost the titles back 6 months later. Other rivalries followed, including clashes with the New Breed and the powerhouse team of the Road Warriors. That Road Warriors feud led to a scaffold match at Starrcade 86, where Cornette infamously injured his knee falling from the scaffold. Then came a major shakeup. In March 1987, Dennis Condrey abruptly left the company without warning. Jim Cornette and Bobby Eaton were left scrambling. Big Bubba Rogers filled in temporarily, but the team needed a permanent partner. Dusty Rhodes stepped in and handpicked Stan Lane, formerly a solo star in Florida. The new duo clicked instantly. Eaton and Lane reached the semifinals of the Crockett Cup tournament and soon won the NWA United States Tag Team titles in May 1987. A year later, in a surprise twist, they were cheered by fans as they defeated the Horsemen's Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard for the end resurfaced in the AWA, living in Denver and taping shows in Las Vegas. He reunited with Randy Rose and, with Paul E. dangerously managing, became the original Midnight Express. They briefly held the AWA World Tag Team titles but left the company over a pay dispute, even while still being billed as champions. Then came a wild moment on WCW television. Paul E. dangerously made a surprise call to Cornette during a broadcast. Moments later, dangerously, Condrey and Rose showed up in person and attacked Cornette and Lane, setting the stage for an explosive feud, the Midnight Express versus the original Midnight Express. But backstage politics, along with tension between the originals, Jim Crockett, and Booker George Scott, put the brakes on that angle. Not long after, Cornette, Lane, and Eaton left WCW due to creative differences. When things cooled down, they returned to participate in a tournament for the vacant tag team titles. They reached the finals but lost to the Freebirds, thanks to interference from the Samoan SWAT team. Back in the heel role, the Express set their sights on Flying Brian and Z-Man, Tom Zenk, for the U.S. tag titles. They won the belts, only to drop them a few months later to the Steiner brothers. Losses kept piling up. By Halloween Havoc 1990, they were beaten by Tommy Rich and Ricky Morton. Then came the breaking point. On October 29, 1990, the team showed up for a TV taping in South Carolina, only to find out they weren't booked. Eaton, who could have spent the day with his family, was understandably upset. The next day, they were scheduled to lose 4 matches in one night at another taping. Cornette, already fed up with WCW President Jim Herd's treatment of the team, confronted Ole Anderson, who told him to go home if he didn't like it. Cornette took him at his word. He walked out, and he told Stan Lane he was done, for good. Lane then too decided to walk away, and with Dennis Condrey already gone, it was clear that the team was finished. Bobby Eaton stayed behind due to family commitments, but when Jim Cornette and Lane left, it marked the end of an era. It wasn't until Arn Anderson went searching for Cornette and Lane, questioning Eaton about their whereabouts, that the truth hit. There was no Midnight Express anymore. For the first time in years, the legendary name was gone. Fast forward to 1998, and the WWF tried to revive the Midnight Express with a new duo, Bob Holly and Bart Gunn, along with Cornette as their manager. They won the NWA World Tag Team Championship from the Headbangers, but despite the legacy, it never felt like the true Midnight Express. Cornette himself even admitted they weren't continuing the original team's legacy. In 2003, Eaton reunited with Dennis Condrey and NWA Mid-Atlantic to form a new Midnight Express. They had a brief run, often facing old rivals, the Rock and Roll Express, culminating in their final match at JCW's Legends and Icons show in 2011. And with that, we've reached the end of our video. We'd love to hear what you think, so drop your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to stay tuned for more awesome content.